When you do a podcast episode that people love so much, I had requests for another episode, and who am I to disappoint? After all, there are so many more curiously named pubs and ones with amazing stories. Let's look at a few more of them. Hi, and welcome back to the Historical Crimes and Criminals podcast. I'm Steve, your host, and it's a big apologies for missing an episode last week. I was down with a cold and could barely speak without coughing and spluttering everywhere, and I thought maybe just have a little bit of a rest and come back doubly as good. In London, many people have arranged to meet friends at the Flask in Hampstead, but as many have found out mistakenly, it's better to clarify which Flask, as there's two. They're both full of character and have an impressive list of celebrity locals and historical past figures. Indeed, the one near Hampstead Tube Station boasts that it's been serving food and drink in its Grade 2 listed building since medieval times. The other Flask is almost 2 miles away on the other side of Hampstead Heath and is at the top of Highgate Hill. The conveniently sited pub has stood on the site since 1663, and its name, and that of the other, comes from a time when flasks of Hampstead mineral water would be sold from the area's wells. It is said that Dick Turpin hid from the law in the stables here too. The closest pub to my flat in London is the Eagle. This 18th century pub, with its beautiful Grecian saloon, was also a music hall. It is best known as it's name-checked and sung by children in the nursery rhyme, which goes up and down the city road, in and out the Eagle. That's the way my money goes. Up goes the weasel. It's believed that the protagonist has spent all his money and he has to pawn something, and weasel is rhyming slang, weasel and stoat, meaning coat. And for any foreign listeners unfamiliar with rhyming slang, it comes from mainly Londoners who, finding they wanted to communicate without foreigners who actually spoke English understanding, would use rhyming slang, i.e. apples and pears, meaning stairs. There is actually a whole dictionary of words, and I came to understand lots of it myself by reading Derek Raymond's 1962 classic crime novel, The Crust on Its Uppers. Thankfully, it came with a 3-page glossary, and I think I spent the first 100 pages going back and forth every second sentence. It taxed my brain, a bit like Irvine Welsh's classic Trainspotting was to do to non-Scots a generation later. A few examples of rhyming slang comes from conversations like the following. How's your artful dodger? This would mean lodger. How's your baker's dozen? Meaning your cousin. How's your bacon and eggs? Meaning legs. Well, unless you're sitting in a cafe eating bacon and eggs. It was complicated further by removing one word. Example, Barnet Fair would just mean hair, and the slang users would just say Barnet, and everybody would understand. And with enough said on that subject, we stay in East London, for our next pub is in Whitechapel, and it has a link to the Jack the Ripper murders. The 10 Bells had 2 of its victims, Mary Kelly and Annie Chapman, as regulars. And in fact, Mary Kelly was last seen here 1 hour before she was murdered. The pub is relatively small, but has a large pavement area in front of it, and on a summer's evening, usually about 60 people are outside drinking, and I don't think I've ever had a seat inside that pub when I've stopped to pass to have a drink. The Blue Bell in Hull was originally a coaching inn. Almost destroyed during the Blitz, landlord Martin Cross managed to save both his burning pub and his parrot from incineration. And luckily for the diet of his parrot, Polly, who was partial to many a gin and tonic over her 25 years residence. In central London, as we saw from an earlier episode, in law there are 4 inns of court, these being Gray's Inn, Lincoln's Inn, Inner Temple and Middle Temple. These inns of court are the professional body to which every barrister in England and Wales needs to belong, and they have their origins, unsurprisingly, in their name, as drinking establishments. And the inns of court started off as ordinary inns where barristers met to do business. The Hoop and Grapes pub in Aldgate is arguably London's luckiest pub. Dating from 1593, this establishment is one of the few timber buildings to have survived the Great Fire of 1666, which destroyed, amongst others, 13,200 homes and 87 churches. And the flames finally stopped, only 50 yards from its front door. And now we hear of another Eagle pub, this time in Cambridge, and it lays claim to be that of scientific importance. The pub was a popular lunch destination for the university staff's physics department. Thus, it became the place where Francis Crick interrupted patrons on lunchtime on the 28th of February 1953 to announce that he and James Watson had discovered the secret of life after they had come up for their proposal for the structure of DNA. And to a story of how Britain used to bend the law to get a sailor or 20. If a time machine ever takes you back to the 18th century Plymouth, you might want to avoid the Minerva Inn for your night out. Plymouth's oldest serving public house dates back to the 1540s. It was one of the pubs where the notorious press gangs operated. These Roman gangs were tasked with rounding up men for the navy. They operated by dropping the king's shilling, and this is a historical slang term for the payment given to armed forces recruits, into their beer. And if the unsuspecting drinkers took even one sip, they would be regarded as taking the king's shilling, and they'd be hauled off into naval service. And for those who resisted, they would generally wake up aboard a ship with a sore head, and it wasn't always just because of the alcohol. In Edinburgh's Royal Mile, near the castle, is the World's End pub. Back in the 16th century, following the Battle of Flodden and Scotland's defeat by the English, Edinburgh had become a walled city for protection. The gates to the city, which form part of the wall, were situated just outside the pub, and as far as the people of Edinburgh were concerned, the world outside these gates was no longer theirs, and hence the pub's name, the World's End. And from pubs that you might want to visit on a trip to Scotland to one that you might not, and we move across to my home city of Glasgow and to the very optimistically named the New Monaco Bar. In this Glasgow newspaper description of the bar more than made me laugh. Quote, "Left as a wee stub when the tenement above it was knocked down, this pub near Glasgow Green was more Mos Eisley Cantina out of Star Wars than the glitz and glamour of the French Riviera Principality. But Lulu's mum was apparently a regular in its 70s heyday. Near the Bank of England is the old Dr. Butler's Head. Dr. Butler was a court physician for James I. His qualities as a doctor were dubious, practising dropping plague victims through a trapdoor into the Thames to treating epilepsy by firing a round from a pistol near unsuspecting patients to frighten the illness away. He owned taverns and produced and sold his Dr. Butler's Purging Ale. This ale had a powerful laxative effect, which, perhaps with some reflection on his clientele's protein-rich diet, was perhaps his greatest contribution to medicine. The original pub was destroyed in the 1666 fire, but rebuilt in the same spot, and I'm happy to tell you, I had a couple of pints in there a few weeks ago and found no laxative ales on tap. And from pubs to a pub group from Chester after my own heart, having recently made the very sensible and long overdue decision to stop finally playing football. The Chester Beer Project are a group with a spokesman who sounds like he's a fixation for the 80s classic series, The A-Team, and he says, there are between 100 and 120 pubs in Chester. Our objective is quite simple, to drink in all of them, in 1 year, on Thursday nights. Who are we? We are a shadowy group who met many years ago through playing five-a-side football on a Thursday night. Each game was always followed by a few pints. We're now too old to play, but we're not too old to drink. We like ale. Names have been changed to protect the innocent. The Hand and Shears is a pub in London's wonderfully named street, Cloth Fair. This pub got its name owing to Bartholomew Fair. Originally, it was a cloth fair, and the tailors would gather in the pub the night before and wave their shears, announcing that the fair should begin. And this famous rowdy fair ran from 1133 to 1855, and we will revisit the fair in a future episode, as it really is a tale worth the telling. And what's better than a pub that's historical and has nice beer? Historical, nice beer, and sensational food. The Guinea Grill is to be found in a mews in Mayfair. Whilst the building itself only dates back to 1720, there's been an inn standing on the site since 1423. And even if you turn up in a pair of flip-flops and ragged shorts, the tuxedo-suited waiters make you feel like you're royalty. It really is my place to go when I've got visitors from outside London. And on the other end of the gastro spectrum, people that know me know I like a Wetherspoons pub. This chain are like the Starbucks of the British pub scene, forever expanding, but to give credit, they do however expand into some interesting old buildings, old banks, etc., and they tend to name their pubs after local historical persons or events. The John Masefield pub is to be found in New Ferry in Merseyside. John Masefield, who lived in the area as a youth, was a former poet laureate of Britain until his death in 1967. However, the pub became infamous in the early 2000s because Wetherspoons hung a portrait of Masefield outside, and the pub's locals realised he was actually the spitting image of the former German leader. The pub is now referred to as the Adolf by locals. And Macefield really should have got rid of that tash. The resemblance is uncanny. In Malta is to be found one of the world's most unique pubs. The island's Lady Di pub in the quiet town of Sliema is full of framed royal memorabilia and photographs of Princess Diana. The pub opened in 1981 after the owner, Frank Kutajar, was introduced to the princess and his fascination grew. And staying on an international theme, it was said that when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, his greatest surprise was that there wasn't an Irish pub there. Indeed, Irish pubs are to be found in the most curious of locations. Bubbles O'Leary is an Irish pub to be found in the Ugandan capital, Kampala. The pub itself owes much of its infrastructure from an ex-pub from Drogheda in Ireland. When Mulligan's was knocked down in 2003, new owner Nigel Sutton shipped the stools, front door, bar and cold room to Africa. And if you're planning to climb the world's highest mountain, you might need a pint or two of Guinness for courage. And you won't be disappointed. In Nepal is to be found the world's highest Irish pub. Once you've reached this pub via a 2-day hike through the Himalayas, you will certainly have worked up a thirst, and you'll learn that this remarkable little pub imports all its alcohol on the backs of yaks and mules. It's called simply the Irish pub, and it's to be found in the Sherpa town of Nishiam Bazaar, perched on the mountainside not far from Everest Base Camp. The proprietors serve boxed wine and extremely well-travelled Guinness at 3,450 metres above the sea, and the pub is complete with a wooden bar and a faded green pool table. The Old Bell and Steelyard Inn is to be found in Woodbridge in Suffolk. This pub dates from about 1540. Outside is the listed Steelyard, which gives the name to the pub. The Steelyard, an impressive 15th century weighbridge, has the unique record of having been taken down in 1897. It was brought to London to form part of a London street at the Victoria era exhibition and then returned to its old site. And now for a story of crime, and also for those who like ghosts. Near Heathrow Airport in Colnbrook is the Ostrich Inn. Over 60 murders were committed in the 16th century at this inn. The victims were done to death by the inn's landlord, John Jarman, and his wife. Spotting a rich traveller, he would shout to his wife, "There's a fat pig if you want one." She would respond, "Put him in the sty and we'll have him tomorrow." One of the bedrooms was fitted with a tipping bed and a trap door, and like a horror film, the wealthy, barely conscious travellers who'd been plied with drink and food and retired for the night in a special luxurious bed would slide out of the bed, through a trap door and into a vat of boiling liquid below, and the remains later disposed of in a nearby brook. Their final victim, Thomas Cole, is still said to haunt the inn. After his murder, the next day, his horse got loose and a search was made for him, and it was known that he'd gone to the inn. Some personal goods were found belonging to him, and the couple eventually confessed to over 60 murders, and they were hanged. A career for me if I had been around in 1830. The Beer House Act of 1830, for the sum of 2 guineas, allowed anyone to open a pub in their own home. They could brew and sell beer or cider, but from your beer house, you could not sell wine or spirits, nor open on a Sunday. Failure to comply, resulting in heavy fines. And lastly today, we actually have alcohol to thank for one of the world's most famous books. On the 10th of November 1951, Sir Hugh Beaver, then managing director of the Guinness Breweries, went on a shooting party at the River Slaney in County Wexford. After missing a shot at a golden plover, he became involved in an argument over which was the fastest game bird in Europe, the golden plover or the red grouse. Beaver knew there must have been numerous other questions debated nightly in pubs throughout Ireland and abroad, and there was no book in the world which to settle arguments about records. He realised that a book supplying the answer to this sort of questions might prove successful. Beaver's idea became reality when Guinness employee Christopher Chataway recommended university friends Norris and Ross McWhirter, who had been running a fact-finding agency in London. The twin brothers were commissioned to compile what became the Guinness Book of Records. In August 1954, 1,000 copies were printed and given away. After the founding of the Guinness Book of Records office at 107 Fleet Street, the first 198-page edition was bound on the 27th of August 1955 and went to the top of the British bestsellers list by Christmas. Well, that's it for another episode of the Historical Crimes and Criminals podcast. I hope you enjoyed that one. Remember to subscribe, tell your friends, give me a shout out on social media, and till next time, bye bye.